All right, welcome back to the program. Joining me right now is David Ado, a senior analyst at Meristem Securities, for us to take a look at the resumption of forex sales to BDCs today. Hello, David, and thanks for joining us on the program.
Hi, Nancy. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, David, for joining us. What do you expect today that the sales of FX resumes? I guess it would have resumed twice a week now, as put by the Apex Bank. What's your expectation?
Okay, so what we expect to see in the near term is that we'll see that trend in the parallel markets continue. The CBN has rightly said that they're going to, start to supply those markets with dollars. Even prior to this, the beginning of the supply, what we saw, I think, for last week, was that we started to see rates at that market begin to decline from as high as 475 at some point. Rates now have declined to about 435. I think around that level. So now that the markets are going to be a lot more supplied, we'll see, rates in the near term remain at this level, as there's now at least some more supply to meet the demand in that market.
What do you think? What do you think would happen to the naira at least this week? Because from even my analysis earlier, and from what we've seen in the past few days, at the parallel market, the naira is trading for around 440, 435, as against 475, 450 that we saw in the past few days. What do you think that will happen to the naira this week, especially as more supply definitely will be this week? So where do you see the naira, the band this week? Hello? Hello, David.
I think the real reason is because a lot of the movements we've seen are not really fundamentally driven. It's some of them by speculative selling. We saw last week that a lot more people are now beginning to sell their FX holdings, their dollar holdings, and that is what is causing the crash. So this week, now that we're starting to see that resumption in international flights, what we know naturally will flow from this is that there will be a lot more demand back to fundamentals, and trying to see how this will play out. We still think that we might remain around this band, 430. Maybe if we see some bullish sentiment that if there's adequate supply, we might even see it fall to around 420 thereabout. But these are still early days, so it's still quite dicey to tell which way the rates will flow. So we're keeping an eye on it, and we think that it will be still around this band come the end of the week.
Okay. From your own analysis, what do you think is the real value of the naira?
Okay, so this, I think last week we released a report that also spoke to this, and one of the things that we highlighted is that at this particular point, we are seeing a lot of downward or negative pressures on the currency, and when from a fundamental perspective, we are seeing that there is a lot weaker demand for naira than there is for dollars. So we demand more for dollars than for naira. So naturally, you will see that the value of our naira relative to the dollars will continue to weaken. And depending on which approach you use to value the naira, it might come to around 440, might come to around 450. But looking at different approaches, you would see that even in the futures markets, the OTC futures market, you see that 1 year futures are priced at around 450, 460 thereabouts. So it still shows that is the level that investors or the market is placing the value of the naira at 1 year from now. So I think using a variety of approaches, you will see that using a variety of approaches, you will see that naira falls
David, are you still there? Okay, it seems the connection isn't a bit strong, it's a bit shaky. Let's try as much as possible to get David back. But before that, if you're just joining us as Moneyline with Nancy, we're looking at the resumption of FX to BDCs today by the Apex Bank, that is the Central Bank of Nigeria. The central bank says it will be selling FX to BDCs twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays. And the remaining days, the BDCs are expected to fill up their Naira accounts with the equivalent. Welcome back, David. Hello, David, can you hear me?
Thank you. Apologies. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Apologies for that.
Yes, okay. Okay, earlier on I asked you what the real value of the Naira is, and you talked to me about what the rate that investors are looking at least between now and the next 1 year. Did I hear you say about 450 to the dollar?
Yeah, I mean, if you check where they are at the OTC futures market, you see that 1 year futures contracts are priced at around between 440 to 450 thereabouts. So that is where the market and investors are also seeing that the Naira will trade 1 year from now. So then again, like I was also saying that depending on the approach you use to do a quick valuation of the Naira, anything you do will probably bring it to around 440, 450 thereabouts. So I think the fair value falls within that range.
Okay. Is there a difference between the fair value and the real value? Because the question I asked you earlier is what is the real value of the Naira? So is there a difference between the fair value now and the real value? Because I actually wanted to ask you, what is the fair value of the Naira as a result of the environment we are right now? I hope you understand my point and where I'm going to.
Yes, I understand your point. And to answer this question, you would naturally look at the various mechanisms that you use for, determining the real value of the Naira. And naturally, that is determined by, trade, the current account balance. So, respectively, what is the demand of the Naira relative to the demand of the dollar in this case. So, using that, you would have a variety of approaches where you use, the purchasing power principle, using different approaches, really. The difference between the real value and then the fair value, I think that is still a little bit of semantics because then again, it has to be backed by fundamentals because the value of a currency is naturally determined by, what is the demand and supply, the demand and supply factors that speak to that currency. So that is, one of the things that you look at when you are trying to ascertain where the value of a currency should be at.
How about the fundamentals of the economy of that country? In this case, the fundamentals of the economy of Nigeria, which we are discussing. Don't you think it would also impact on the Naira? And that was why I asked that question. Perhaps there's a real value and there is also a fair value. If investors or if people are that confident in an economy, it will also impact the currency.
Okay. So, I mean, if we're now speaking to, the fundamentals of the country that is going to impact the value of the currency, then I would naturally be looking at, what is, our current account balance? Because that's the first place you look at. The current account balance essentially, speaks to the value of transactions that we as a country carry out with the rest of the world. We're looking at the current, the balance of payments and the likes. So, from data that we've seen in the current period, we've seen that the current account balance has consistently weakened. I think from the third quarter of 2018, when the current accounts entered into a negative position. So if it's in a deficit position, that means that we are essentially a net borrower from the rest of the world because there's a lot more. We are demanding more for foreign services than we are supplying. So when we look at that perspective, you see that figures from the CBN revealed that from the third quarter of 2018, subsequently throughout 2019, we recorded negative current account balance. There's a current account balance deficit. I think as of 2018, that was to the tune of roughly $17 billion in the negative. This the first quarter of 2020, we've done about $4.7 billion deficit. That was even before, the COVID pandemic hit. So looking at it from that perspective, then you will naturally see that, the currency, our currency is naturally going to get weaker with regards to the dollar because we demand more for foreign goods than we supply. So then also when you now look at it from the financing part, looking at capital importation, looking at other forms of financing, at least to keep our exchange rate at a stable bound. We are at the moment not receiving as much, we're not attracting as much attention from the foreign world, from the foreign portfolio investors, the foreign direct investment as we used to in the past. And that was even evidenced in the recent data published by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, because it revealed that there was significant decline in the value of currency that was brought into the country in the second quarter, relative to even the first quarter of 2020 and this corresponding quarter of 2019. There was a significant decline, and that is even something that is responsible for some of the declines or some of the weakening we've seen in the value of our currency, over time. And naturally, when this occurs, what you would see is that the value of the currency is supposed to weaken. But because of the way the kind of the exchange rate regime that we run at the moment, where the CBN still tries to manage the value of the FX and keep it within a desired bound, even if fundamentals are not supporting it. So that is what we see. That's what we saw during this period. And naturally, because of that, CBN is unable to continue that intervention. Then we start to see that FX illiquidity start to come in, where CBN stayed off intervening in the market, and we started to see that liquidity, those demand for dollars start to build up in that space. So that is, this is just to give like a background to some of the things that we've seen so far. And now that the CBN is starting to resume forex to the BDC operators, it's going to be interesting to see how this will play out if our fundamentals actually support the value of the naira remaining at that particular range that we've seen. 386 thereabouts.
Yes, the central bank has also moved against about 38 companies for FX infractions, instructing the banks, the deposit money banks, to post no debits. There's an instruction of post no debits on those accounts. What do you think? Do you see that the central bank is getting a bit stricter with sanctions against FX, bearing in mind that we are fighting a pandemic? Number two, the naira is weak even as it is right now. FX reserves at around $35 billion. So the CBN is going hard and tough on some of these companies that are into FX infractions.
Yes. Naturally, what the CBN would resort to is a form of demand management tactics. And if you go back to 2016, 2017, when we had that, that currency crunch at that particular point in time, you saw that what the CBN did was to sort of, introduce some, goods into the FX restriction list, and that essentially just to curb demand. And that is what we are seeing replicate itself now with some of the new directives that the CBN is doing. So this one to, these 38 companies that, they're trying to get them to, trying to just clear up that space. The real dynamics of how, they have been carrying out those infractions, they are not available. So I can't specifically say that, CBN is right or not right to have done that. But, observing the reason behind some of their actions is essentially speaking to that demand management, that we're trying to use all available means to manage the FX that we have and ensure that any demand that we are meeting at this point is backed by fundamentals. So that's what it's trying to do.
David, how do you trade the naira right now on the basis of high inflation of 12.82%, on the basis of a forthcoming MPC this month? So how do you really trade the naira with resumption of sales today to BDCs? For someone perhaps watching or with a system abroad, what's your advice?
How to trade in naira? That is a very interesting question. And if you probably even speak to other FX traders in the field, they will tell you that one of the things that you do or you should do is to take a longer position on the dollar relative to the naira. Or hey, this is for people that are trying to speculate and trying to take advantage of the take advantage of some opportunities in that space. But really, the real idea is that what we've seen so far is the CBN is now gradually trying to, unify the different windows and sort of, curb any inefficiencies in that space, so that what value that we're seeing with that fundamental value, and we are not going to see a lot of opportunities for arbitrage, because I mean, if you look at what CBN is saying, we're going to sell to the parallel market operators at 386, and if you look at where the markets are right now, there is still at 430. I don't know where it is right now, but at the last time it's around 430, 435. So that means that if people who are ordinarily in that space and you want to make some trades, there's arbitrage opportunity. But I mean, that is some of the things that the CBN is trying to curb against, to ensure that the value of the naira is backed by fundamental demands and not for speculative gain.
Final question: as an investor, how much sense do you think it will make to an investor holding Nigerian investments right now, be it equities, be it bonds? Does it make sense to hold Nigerian investments right now, given the fact that FDI and FPI both are falling?
So for a foreign investor looking at the Nigerian space, I think that aside the negatives, you now begin to look at, okay, so what are the opportunities that are being created in this space? Really, in the short term, it's not going to be, in the short term, there are a lot of risks that are, that are becoming a lot more obvious and a lot more pertinent with, higher inflation, with this uncertainty around the FX rates, and also the ease of repatriating your funds when you actually want to. But some of the positives that you can take is that the government at various levels are now, implementing measures that will make it a lot more, that will make the country a lot more attractive. And when you stay over the long term, you get some pretty decent returns on your initial investment. So it's just a case of balancing, what exactly are your own investment goals with what is currently obtainable in the country. So if you are looking at, if you want to really look at it, then at this moment, I would just advise, taking a much more longer term perspective to whatever decision you are making versus, a shorter term perspective.
A long-term perspective on everything, both bonds, equities, on all kind of investments, because the market should naturally offer you anything you want, be it short-term, mid, or long-term. Very quickly.
Yes. So essentially, that's what you look at. If you quickly look at our equities market, for example, and you'll see that we've started to see that gradual recovery over 2 consecutive quarters now. In the first quarter, you saw that there was that significant decline. For the second quarter and year to date in the third quarter, you've seen that the value has sort of started reducing some of those losses. So essentially, really, what you'll be looking at is taking a longer term perspective, and there are 1 or 2 names that you can bank on, that these names will at least give you decent returns, over a longer time horizon. Then when you look at the other markets as well, yields in the bonds market and the like. So a lot of things would affect the direction of the yields over a longer time, or over the long term. But essentially, you want to make your decisions based on a longer term view.
Okay. Thank you very much, David, for coming through today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. That's David Adu from Meristem Securities, a senior analyst at Meristem Securities. Let's quickly take a break, and when we come back, still the same issue, perhaps another kind of perspective. Emmanuel Adeleke, an investment analyst, will be joining me after the break. Don't forget, go to all our social media handles, like, follow us, subscribe. We'll be right back. Hello everyone, welcome to the program. It's Moneyline with Nnaji.
It is in difficult time that nations take decisions to build their country.
Everybody agrees now that more than ever before, we need to cooperate.
Nancy, I think I would be remiss to say that, look, Nigerian economy is vulnerable.
So we have to come up with strategies as governments. How do we deal with this issue of hunger? How do we get food into people's hands?
What kind of thinking should we be having at this time? Who is the subsidy favoring?
There is no subsidy, it's zero. It's zero forever, Nancy.
You can join us on all our social media platforms. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. You need to go to YouTube right now. You watching me, go to YouTube now and subscribe. Moneyline with Nancy TV. Welcome back. Emmanuel Adeleke, an investment analyst, is joining me also. Hello, Mr. Adeleke. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, you're welcome. Nice joining you.
Today, BDCs are expecting sales from the Apex Bank. What kind of movement do you expect today as it concerns the local currency?
So even before now, start to see the Naira appreciate at the parallel markets. It was coming from the highs of the 480, it's now to about 430. So with the sales starting kicking off today, expect that sales to ease out the pressure that we've been seeing in the parallel markets. Definitely, so from today, we expect to even see more gains on the Naira. Particularly for me, I expect you will see the Naira close the year at about between 400 to 450 by the end of the year. That's at the parallel markets.
Okay. Your own analysis is that you expect the Naira to close between 400 and 450 by December of this year.
Yes, by December of this year.
Okay, why that band?
Okay, so if we look at where it's coming from about 480, even before now, I've been mentioning that most of what actually took the Naira to that level has been speculations, low speculations. And now I think that even also explains the fact that despite CBN had not even started selling dollar to the BDC guys, we already started to see the Naira appreciate at the parallel market. So again, that just points to you that most of what has been driving the rates at that parallel market has been more of speculation. So in regards to that, once the CBN now even starts to sell FX to the BDC guys, that should ease the pressure. So in summary, I don't see that upside for I don't see that my further downside in terms of the Naira. As a matter of fact, I expect the Naira to gain at the parallel market as the pressure is going forward. But beyond 2020, so it's a different play. It's a different play. But for 2020, that's just my expectation for the Naira for the rest of this year.
Adeleke, that's your analysis. Of course, a lot of our viewers may just be banking on your forecast and prediction. You know, it's a business show, so a lot of people take a lot of information to the bank. So for those watching, you have said that the Naira should be between 400 and 450 by the end of this year. God willing, we will also see by the end of this year, and I'll remind you what you said, and hopefully see where the Naira will be at that point. But from what you've said, that means that speculation and hoarding will be discouraged as a result of this move by the CBN. But with your own analysis, and the speculation will stop, do you see any kind of risk that will trigger the Naira to another free fall between now and December? So I'm giving you a leeway there.
Okay. So you're right. So there's actually a risk attached to this, and I think the two risks I believe that are attached to this is if we see a second wave of the coronavirus, start to see more economies shutting down. Already now we started to see economies resuming back, but if a second wave should come in, we start to see more economies shutting down. That would definitely affect demand for crude oil, and should you see crude oil going to as low as maybe $25 $25 or even $30 per barrel again, definitely this whole outlook will definitely change. Should crude oil price go to as low as $30 again, definitely this outlook will definitely change. We'll definitely see more depreciation at the various FX segments.
You know, the Central Bank of Nigeria moved towards FX unification, I think last month. That's in, yes, in August. When it also said it's adjusted the naira to about perhaps 380 something now, 386, and the official market is 379. Let me also ask you the question I asked David, because I realize if you speak to different analysts or two economists, they may have two different views. What do you think is the real value of the naira? What is the real value?
So for me, I think the fundamental value for the naira should be around 450 naira per dollar now. On the contrary, we're seeing the naira doing at about 380. Then regarding that unification of FX rates, personally, I believe what we're seeing now is not a unified. We're not having a unified rate. We're just trying to. We have a unified rate, but we don't have a single rate. And I think
Okay, seems the network has frozen this time. Let's quickly try to reconnect with Emmanuel to conclude our discussion. But if you're just joining us, welcome. Do join us on all our social media platforms, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube. Go to all our handles right now. Like us, follow us. From what you've heard Mr. Adeleke say just in a few seconds ago, he did say that he's expecting the naira to be within the band of 400 and 450. Okay, Emmanuel, you're back. So the real value of the naira, yes, the real value of the naira you're saying is 450?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
You actually said before the interruption that the real value of the naira, it's around 450 naira to the dollar.
Yes. The real value of the naira should be around 450. On the contrary, we're actually seeing it at about 380. So I was also mentioning the unification of rates. Presently, what Nigeria actually needs is a single rate rather than we trying to unify rates. Because I'm going to explain this. Now that CBN, we have two different major rates. That's the official rates. That's the CBN official rate, as well as the NAFES rate. Definitely by next year, this NAFES rate will definitely not remain at 380 due to these several external factors. I actually expect the naira to actually go above to depreciate to above 400 at the NAFES rates. So what that means is that we'll definitely have more than one rate. The CBN again will have to try to find this rate. However, a single solution that will stop all this will just be we just having one single rate and avoid what is trying to unify rates several times. So I think that's just my view in terms of unification of rates.
Emmanuel, what do you think about the CBN policy on not approving FX to middlemen anymore, to eliminate middlemen, especially for those seeking from M applicants?
Yeah, so the idea behind that is that most time when middlemen comes into the picture, it typically adds to the cost of whatever items they are importing. First to the CBN, that's more dollar sales. Secondly, to the final consumers also, you're also getting to see more more costs because middlemen would have factored in their own costs. However, if we should see most companies coming in directly, so I believe that should reflect the true cost at which they actually need. So we'll definitely see a reduction in terms of what each company would have actually demanded if they still use middle agents.
How about for those, because we know the kind of markets we have, because some people, I think even LCCI has also complained that some people that need FX may not directly go to the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers or what. Do you understand what I mean? So they need middlemen. Yeah. And we have a lot of them. So what's your own view about that?
Well, it's going to be a tough one for most of these companies. But I mean, the CBN has already brought up the policy, and I think they actually bent on it. They are actually bent on implementing it. So what I would say is that most companies will definitely have to develop a way internally or one way or the other by which they would be able to do by which they'll be able to source or import most of these materials themselves rather than using agents.
Now, as sales of Forex resume today for BDCs, how do you think that, how much of all price volatility actually is priced into the Naira? How much of it? Because earlier on during my analysis, the Brent crude is trading around 42, 43, 44 US dollars a barrel. So how much of all price volatility is priced into the Naira? If oil is selling at a higher price, how will it impact the Naira? If oil is selling at a lower price, how will it impact the Naira?
Yeah. So at point $40 a barrel, we see lower oil inflow to the CBN. And lower oil inflows typically means you're getting lower FX and to the reserves. Aside the oil inflow, the CBN also have non-oil inflow. Non-oil inflow. But recently, when you look at the past few 2 or 3 years or so, and typically in terms of oil inflow has typically accounted for about 40 to 45% in terms of inflows to the CBN. So it's a very significant portion in terms of inflows. So typically when you see oil prices go very low, that typically also affects oil inflows that inflows into the reserves, and it also affects the ability of the CBN to defend the Naira. So most time what you tend to see is that lower oil price will definitely translate into lower into depreciation in the Naira. Personally, I think should the oil price go to as low as $25-30, we'll definitely see an amount of depreciation of in the Naira in the range of about 50 Naira or so. So let's assume now currently the rate at the NAFEX rate is being about 30. So if you see oil price go as low as $25-30, definitely I expect to see that Naira as the NAFEX window to depreciate to around 420, about 420 to about 420 or so. So the reverse is also the case. When we also see Naira when we see the oil price actually go as high, that would also give more effects to the CBN. It means the CBN will be able to defend the Naira as more than ever. So that's for the oil price. You also have the non-oil inflows also. Unfortunately, non-oil inflow has also been low recently, and that has been due to foreign investor sentiment on the market. FPI inflows has been drastically low, so that has also affected inflows also into the FX reserves.
Okay. How do you think that COVID-19 pandemic as well as the border closure has impacted the Naira? And do you see the government perhaps opening up the borders in the next few weeks or in the next few months, and perhaps how it would impact on the Naira?
So for the border, in terms of borders and the impact on Naira, I actually think that has been positive in a sense that with the whole lockdown, border close, we've actually seen imports. So the latest data released by NBS showed that imports actually expanded just slightly. And without that borders, imports would have expanded significantly, and that would have resulted into significant FX demand from the CBN. However, with the border closure and the all, we actually saw that slight increase in terms of FX demand from the CBN. But going forward, as the economy continues to improve, kicks off gradually, and the border opens, we definitely begin to see more pickup in imports, and also that also translates into more FX demand for imports, and that is quite negative. That's quite negative for the CBN, because when you are getting more outflows than your inflows, that would affect the ability for the CBN to defend the Naira. So that's when you tend to see Naira depreciates at the various windows.
Okay, just finally, Emmanuel, can you explain to my viewers what we've been talking about the different windows? You have the I and E window, that is investors and exporters window. We have the NAFEX rate. we have the official window. Just explain to them what these segments mean, especially as it relates to Forex that we've been discussing.
Okay, so first of all, we have the official window. The official window is where you can tend to see most government, where you tend to see more transaction related to government, and as well as even and also that also affects the budget, and also affects PMS and importation. And then we also have the NAFES rate, which is the IW. The rates they are currently doing at about 3 to 3.64. The CBN actually introduced that in April 2017. So what you have importers and exporters coming to buy and sell dollar, with the CBN intervening at times whenever the demand occurs, whenever they need to intervene, actually intervene there. And then actually we tend to see most transaction at the IEW, which is NAFES rate. I think almost over 70% of FX transaction actually occurred there. Then lastly, we also have the BDC rates. We also have the BDC rates and the parallel market rates. So the CBN does recognize the parallel market rate as a rate. We don't recognize BDC rates. However, due to scarcities of dollars and the likes, we've also seen parallel market rates, by which most guys can actually also go. Guys that can't access the NAFEX go to the parallel market. But all in all, in summary, most of the transactions that have always been seen has been happening on the IEW, which is NAFEX rates. Over 70% of FX transactions has been happening at IEW.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for joining us today. Thank you for coming through.
Yeah, it's nice.
All right.
It's my pleasure.
I'll be speaking with Emmanuel Adeleke, an investment analyst. That's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. Thank you all for investing your time with us. Please invest your time with us again tomorrow, same time on this station. I am Nnaji, telling you to be the best version of yourself, as well as keeping safe. Just keep safe. I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye now. Thank you for watching our video. Please hit the subscribe button below, turn on post notification to follow all our updates.